Hello and welcome to the CM14 Gemini Cup guide. The Gemini Cup is a 1600 mile course that will take place on the Tokyo race course. This means that this course is going to be a standard distance course with left-handed and spring runner as your speed greens, as well as sunny days as your guts green and firm conditions as your power green. Here's the Gemini Cup course map. Now the CM14 map is a course that we have seen before in CM3, but now we have a lot more tools to optimize it. So as you can see, the final spurt is going to start on the last corner. It's going to start towards the end of the final corner, which means that the final straight is going to start just a few meters after the final spurt begins. This means that there's going to be a lot of viable skills that we can take, and we kind of have the luxury of choice in being able to really build towards what we want. So the keywords that we're looking for here is a late race corner acceleration, which will hit perfectly. A late race straight acceleration will be a little bit delayed, but still viable. And then any kind of final corner velocity skills or corner velocity skills in general can have carryover, which will be very strong on this course. So when we're continuing our discussion of accelerations, these are the typical final corner acceleration that people are going to think about when they think of corner accels. Angling and scheming is a first place only acceleration. Let's pump some iron is a sixth place only acceleration, and moving past and beyond does not work, so please do not take it this CM. And now we're looking at our final straight accelerations. As a reminder, the final straight is going to start just a couple meters after the final spurt begins, so they will be a little bit delayed, but not so much that it makes it unviable. Victoria por plancha is a first and second place acceleration. Give Mummy a hug is a second through fourth place acceleration. It does say in the tooltip that it's first through fourth, but you do have to have an UMA in front of you, which means that it only works from second place. Now, both of these skills are a 0.1 acceleration only, so it's not extremely strong compared to some of the alternatives. Straightaway spurt and encroaching shadow is an end closer only acceleration, and the only condition is that you have to be an end closer and you have to pass your wet check in order to hit these accelerations. We now have a new acceleration in louder trace and cheer, which is a 0.4 acceleration on King Halo Cheer herself and a 0.2 acceleration when inherited. However, louder trace and cheer has a lot of prerequisites, the most stringent of which is that you must not hit 6th place by 50% of the way through the race. This can make it a little bit tricky and lobby dependent on whether or not this acceleration will be either viable or just completely shut off. Additionally, for louder trace and cheer, you cannot be rushed, so it is similar to moving past and beyond, which does make it a little bit less reliable as well. Now let's talk about our halfway through the final corner accels, because now we have two of them. We are comparing here Budding Blossom, which is the Nishino Flower acceleration, as well as Shooting for Victory, which is the Taiki Shuttle acceleration that we all know and love. So Budding Blossom is a little bit more complex than Shooting for Victory, but they both crucially happen in third or fourth positions. For Budding Blossom, it will only proc in the first place if you were at some point side blocked on a mid-race corner. But Budding Blossom is going to hit on the second half of the final corner or later. So first it's going to check to see if you are currently in the late race, which is the final spurt. And then it's going to check if you have already been halfway through the final corner. This means that Budding Blossom is going to always be delayed until the optimal time when we are on maps where the final spurt starts, when we are halfway through the final corner or later. Taiki Shuttle unique doesn't have to worry about any of that. She just has to be third and fourth on the second half of the final corner only. So this unique is always going to hit at the exact same time, which is going to be 50% of the way through the final corner. Which means that the Budding Blossom unique will actually be a lot more flexible than our Shooting for Victory unique. As we can see here, Shooting for Victory only works on Taiki herself. We do not want to inherit Shooting for Victory on anyone. Budding Blossom, however, does work on everyone. As you can see in this zoomed in race diagram here, because Budding Blossom only happens when we are in the late race, it won't proc until we actually hit that threshold, which makes it very strong as an inherit. However, Taiki Shuttle unique is always going to hit 50% of the way through the final corner, which means that if we inherit it, it's going to end before the late race actually starts, so it's not helpful for us. For Taiki Shuttle herself, however, her longer duration of her unique is going to have it carry over into the final spurt. So she's going to get just a little bit of the duration of her unique in order to start that powerful acceleration. In this example, the blue UMA here that has both Shooting for Victory and this blue Budding Blossom is Taiki Shuttle, and the red UMA that has this red Budding Blossom and red Shooting for Victory is going to be Nishino Flower. So you can see when Shooting for Victory is inherited, it does end too quickly. When Budding Blossom is inherited, it still begins at the exact right time, which is why we want to take Budding Blossom on everyone who can conceivably hit it, and why we never want to inherit shooting for victory on this track. So we have a lot of acceleration options in this CM, but a lot of them are highly conditional. In my opinion, the most consistent and strongest accelerations are going to be angling and scheming and straightaway spurt or encroaching shadow if you are near Titan. Now, I do think that Budding Blossom is a very strong acceleration, and I think that it's going to be very strong in basically every position except for front runners. But because you can't really guarantee that it's going to hit because it's so lobby dependent on whether or not there's a lot of fronts or no fronts, then it's going to be a little bit trickier for us to really manage. So I do recommend that every Uma is running at least one of these. I would say that fronts only or a lucky pace attempt is going to be taking angling and scheming. Obviously, ends only will be taking straightaway spurt or encroaching shadow, and I would say that pace, lates, or even ends could take Budding Blossom to try and get that additional acceleration. And then after that, you can add less consistent accelerations to try to round out and cover all your bases. So let's talk about Guts. I have seen a lot of questions about Guts and Guts builds coming up during the prep and lead up to CM14. And this is because Guts is now kind of suddenly an option. It's a very popular option because, firstly, we do hit stat caps relatively easily. On the Tokyo 1600, we don't really have to build that much stamina just because Trackblazer gives us so many stats anyway. You generally will finish a Trackblazer run with enough stamina to survive the Tokyo racecourse, which means that we can funnel more turns into speed and wit, which means that we're generally maxing speed and wit and probably sometimes power. So once we're at a point where we're already hitting stat caps in like the really important stats, then we start thinking, well, what if I was also building up other stats? And this is where the long final straight of the Tokyo racecourse comes in. We're currently in the middle of the Japanese Derby CM, which has the same final stretch. So you can really tell in the Japanese Derby CM when your Umas start dueling one another, they tend to push up a lot more. And dueling is a lot more common in the Tokyo home stretch because it is such a long final straight. So because we have a better chance of dueling, Guts becomes more relevant. It's not a must-do, especially if you don't have the cards for it. If you're trying to force a Guts build, you might be worse off than you would if you were just playing to your account strengths in the first place. However, Guts is pretty strong on the Tokyo racecourse, especially on the CM, where we now have a very strong gold skill in the Bamboo Memory Guts card. So let's take a quick sidebar here and talk about what Guts actually does. So what Guts will actually do for your Uma is it will, one, reduce your HP consumption in the final spurt. Now, this isn't a HP replacement, but it does mitigate your HP consumption. Additionally, it increases your velocity, your top speed while you're spot struggling, and crucially, it increases your velocity, your speed while you are dueling. So your speed, the speed that you go at when you're in a duel, is proportional to the amount of Guts that you have, which means that building a lot of Guts and kind of gambling for dueling procs is going to be a pretty strong strategy. Now again, I don't think it's going to be 100% necessary to succeed in the CM, especially if you don't have the cards for it. But if you do have the cards for it, and if you're interested in building your Umas a different way, then I do think that Guts builds, Guts decks are very viable. A little fun extra is that building Guts usually gives you just a lot of stat total, like just so many stats. And this allows you to stat pad for higher ratings. The only caveat to Guts builds is that you want to be careful that you're still managing to build up your wit quite a bit, because wit is going to help you push up in the mid game, and wit is going to help you to activate all of your skills. So from this, you can see that Guts will help you in certain scenarios, but it is not a necessary absolute must-have all the time. So let's start talking about team comps. Let's start with Triple Front. For front comps, Triple Front is very strong just because it augments the strengths of all three fronts. Triple Front can deny a Budding Blossom acceleration slot while they compete for first and second to take the Angling and Scheming and Victoria for Plancha accelerations. Triple Front is very strong because Triple Speed Eater is very strong, and additionally, the more fronts you have, the more likely you are to be able to duel down the final spurt with one another. Frontrunners are very strong in general in this CM, including Summer Maru, Smart Falcon, Saiyan Sky, Valentine Mihono Bourbon, Ines Fujin, and others. If you are running a triple front composition, your general goal is to push each other as far as possible so that end closers cannot catch up with you on the final spurt. Now, when we're talking about double front will lose a butting slot, but it does enable you to run an additional pace late or end. When you are running double front, you can also run a backliner, an end closer most likely, with the Keen Eye skill, and the Keen Eye skill will help to drag other Umas back so that your fronts have less competition. Or if you're running your double front with a pace chaser, your pace chaser could try to take Budding Blossom, or just be Taiki Shuttle, or both, which would help you to get that acceleration on your pace and hopefully allow your pace to challenge your fronts as you're going down the home stretch. Now, for pace chaser focused team comps, there are a lot of options, but none of them I think are really amazing. So you have your Budding Blossom, which I already explained. You have your Shooting for Victory, which again is Taiki Shuttle only. Give Mummy a Hug is a decent pace acceleration, but it is only a 0.1 and it is delayed, so it's not an extremely strong one. You can gamble on Head On, or if you want to take the Gacha Daiwa Scarlet Power card, you can use her gold skill Neck and Neck to try to gamble that it will hit early enough to be impactful in the late race. You can also run your pace with Nimble Navigator if you're running fronts, or you can try to run your pace with Angling and Scheming and just hope that there are no fronts in the lobby. Because end closers are so strong, there is a decent chance that we might not see a whole lot of fronts in lobbies. I might think that it would be similar to how the CM13 lobbies are shaking out, where some lobbies there are no fronts, some lobbies there are 4, and you just have to kind of try to guess. Pace Chasers, again, is going to be playing for 3rd and 4th place for Budding Blossom, but they are going to be pretty inconsistent compared to front or end. A big reason for this is because they don't have access to the crucial debuffs that is Speed Eater or Keen Eye. However, Speed Star is a very good pace chaser velocity as it can hit with significant carryover potential. Late surgers have the same inherent problem as pace chasers in that they're just not going to be very consistent. They can play for 3rd and 4th place for that Budding Blossom slot, but again, they don't really have consistent access to debuffs or skills. The positional requirements of a lot of late surger accessible skills are going to be very painful, especially because we're in such a heavy end closer meta. So late surgers can often be pushed out of their positions by heavy end closer lobbies, which means that they're not going to get skills like Furious Feet, Let's Pump Some Iron on your left, Full of Vigor. Just a lot of positional based skills that want them to be further back are going to be harder for them to hit in metas where end closers are going to be a lot more common. End closers are really, really fascinating in this CM. So end closers have a variety of skills that they can take for acceleration. They can take Budding Blossom for that 3rd to 4th position acceleration, which does help if they are in end closer heavy lobbies and they are pushing up through skills like Daring Strike. Of course, your end closer is always going to want to take Straightaway Spur and Encroaching Shadow, no matter what. And then we get into a little bit of a more interesting situation here. Louder Trace and Cheer, I've seen a lot of people get really excited about this skill, but I think that Louder Trace and Cheer is going to be maybe kind of frustrating in practice because it is so lobby dependent and it can turn off very, very easily. So with Louder Trace and Cheer, you have about a 5-second buffer at the beginning of a race where your Uma is expected to fall into 7th or below. And they have to stay 7th or below in the first 50% of the race. If they touch 6th place, they will no longer have access to this skill, which means that skills like Daring Strike, or if you get, an early Professor of Curvature that hits a little bit too early, or if you get an Uma stand that pushes you up, then you might not be able to activate Louder Trace and Cheer. Additionally, it also shuts off if you get rushed. So there's a couple different ways that Louder Trace and Cheer can just not activate, which means that it's going to be pretty inconsistent. I don't think that Louder Trace and Cheer is really the answer for end closer heavy compositions. Now, I do think that it is going to be pretty good in solo end compositions, but you really have to think about how you're using it and how you can really optimize keeping it on its uptime. I would suggest not gambling on Furious Feet. Firstly, the cards that give you Furious Feet are not very good, and secondly, Furious Feet is a RNG skill which can activate at any point in the late race, and I do believe that end closers have enough reliable skills that they don't need to waste the SP or the deck slot on a Furious Feet pickup. Nimble Nav is another one that you can pick up if you get some hints for, or you get it in an inspiration. I don't think it's a make or break, but it is kind of a nice to have. For end, a triple end closer comp is going to be very strong because you can use 2 of your end closers to push Taishin into 7th place for guaranteed nemesis on the final corner. Triple end can also run double or triple Keen Eye from the Gold City SSR card, which will help to debuff the rest of the lobby and drag them closer to where your end closers can overtake them. Now, backliners in particular really do want to try to take Guts builds for access to the Full of Vigor skill. Full of Vigor is a gold velocity skill that has a very high chance of carryover because it activates in the final corner. Now, I will say that ends also monopolize these backliner slots a lot better than late surgers can because end closers are more likely to be in that 5th position or worse on the final corner, which means that I think that Full of Vigor is really a strong skill for end closers and a somewhat inconsistent skill for late surgers. And the final caveat here is that I do think that Full of Vigor is only worth it if you can run Mr. CB Wit and Bamboo together. So if you don't have Mr. CB Wit, then I might suggest dropping the idea of a Guts build so that you can borrow CB Wit, which will help you a lot when it comes to your crucial relevant stats, as well as giving you that very good Daring Strike skill. However, if you do have CB Wit or Bamboo Memory and you can borrow the other one, then I do think that this is probably going to be the meta build in this CM. So let's talk really quick about the MVP of CM14. So this is going to be none other than the potential Uma herself, Narita Taishin. Taishin has Encroaching Shadow, and she is the only Uma in the game still that has Encroaching Shadow, which means that she's just automatically getting a 0.4 acceleration, which is more than pretty much anybody else at this point. So her acceleration alone makes her a contender. However, she also has her unique skill, which is Nemesis. And Nemesis is often pretty overlooked, but in this CM, because the final corner is where the late spurt starts, Nemesis will give you a pretty decent chance of having it carry over, which means that she can have a very strong, unique skill with carryover. You can also run Keen Eye on your other backliners to drag the fronts back and give her a better shot to catch up with them, and Narita Taishin can run Full of Vigor very, very easily, which also gives her another gold velocity skill with a carryover chance. And then of course Taishin and all other end closers do get access to Mr. CB Wit, which is just a very good card. Like, CB Wit is a very strong card. In addition, it also has a very strong skill in Daring Strike, which is a long-term mid-race velocity that helps her ignore pace down mode and continue to push up throughout the mid-race. Taishin also has a 20% guts, 10% speed growth, which makes her pretty good at dueling and very good at having guts-based builds. Overall, I think that we're going to see a lot of Taishin, and Taishin is pretty much going to be the meta Uma to beat this CM. So this CM is going to be pretty complex because we do have a luxury of choice when it comes to skill selections, and I think that building intentionally, building thoughtfully towards your comp and towards the skills that you're taking is going to be the difference between just doing okay and performing very well in the CM. So with that, I'm going to just give some of my thoughts on various accelerations and velocity skills. So Pour Plancha and Give Mommy a Hug are both final straight acceleration skills, and crucially, they're only 0.1 acceleration skills. They are also both delayed in the final stretch, which means that you're not really getting a huge value out of them. You're still getting value. I think they're still worth the pickup, but it's not a #1 priority. I would not ruin your entire legacy lines just to include these skills. I would not ruin your chances of inheriting Mile S or even Turf S if it comes to inheriting these skills. I do think that Louder, Trace, and Cheer needs a comp built around it. I think that Louder, Trace, and Cheer is going to work best on solo end, and even then you can still get unlucky, but solo end is going to give you a better shot of fulfilling the requirements of staying very far in the back. Budding Blossom is a very strong, almost universal acceleration that only the first and second position cannot really access. So I do think that Budding Blossom should be taken by all non-fronts, and I am including end closers in this if you are running an end closer like Taishin that can get that strong Daring Strike, that can get a lot of mid-race skills to try to push up into 4th place by the late race. Even if Budding Blossom is a little bit delayed, it's still a stronger acceleration than Pour Plancha or Give Mommy a Hug, which means that delaying it a little bit as your Uma is pushing up into 4th place is still going to be stronger than either of those two skills. For velocity skills, I think that generic corner velocity skills are going to be very strong and should be chased if you can possibly get them. Now in CM13, Professor of Curvature lost a little bit of value because you could lose a lot of that velocity increase on the final acceleration. However, there's a very small chance of that happening again here in CM14, and there's a much larger chance of being able to hit Professor of Curvature with a significant speed carryover. This makes it a pretty strong skill to pick up, and I do think that Kita-san Black should be a slot in everyone's deck. Additionally, your final corner velocity skills are even stronger because they have an even higher chance of hitting with that carryover. This is going to be your Full of Vigor skill that we get from that Bamboo Memory Guts, which requires you to be 5th or below. This is going to be your Speed Star, which is a pace-only skill, and this is going to include Rising Dragon, which is a little bit harder to proc because you do have to overtake someone on the final corner, but it can be very strong. End closer only can take Daring Strike, which is that strong mid-race velocity and PDM break. Another thing that I wanted to mention with velocity skills is that late race velocity skills are always very strong, and on the Tokyo home stretch, they are even more amplified because we get that long stretch where you're just trying to outrun everyone. And especially if we're thinking about unique skills such as Lights of Vaudeville or Surpass the Sakura, there's a bunch of other ones as well, but those can also make a huge difference when it comes to trying to get to first or protect your first place win. With debuffs, we do have two major debuffs that work on mile tracks, and that is going to be Keen Eye, which is going to be a 6th or below debuff in the beginning of the race, or Speed Eater, which is going to be a mid-race, which is going to take some speed. I would say that Keen Eye works well on any end, but it is hard to fit that deck slot of Gold City SSR Speed onto a ace end closer. So if you are working Keen Eye onto your end closers, you might want to consider just making it end closer debuffer. Debuffers that are full debuffers can also give hesitant support. All of the hesitant debuffs work on the CM, and so the debuff comps are very scary, especially when they include really strong Umas like Valentine Verbin or Narita Taishin. So it is definitely something to consider if you are thinking about running some more supportive Umas to your main ace. In closing, I do believe that in CM14, fronts and ends are going to dominate. We are going to see a lot of triple comps, and we're also going to see a lot of 2 front, 1 end comps. So triple fronts, triple ends, or 2 front, 1 end, I do think are probably going to be the strongest comps. I do think that pace and late can still compete with luck and team building, especially if you're in a position of just outbuilding the opponents. I've seen lucky pace wins, I've seen paces hit skills with really good carryover and dual fronts down the home stretch to win, so I do think that it is possible for pace and lates to pick up a couple wins, but you are kind of fighting an uphill battle because fronts and ends just have so many more tools in this CM. So that's all I have. I hope that this was helpful. Please let me know in the comments if you have any questions or if there's something that I missed. I would love to hear about it. Thank you so much, and I hope that you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.